Good morning. This is the Leafs Convo podcast for Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, VanguardNE.ca. I'm Norman James in London, Ontario, joined as always by Mike Augello in Cheektowaga, New York.
Good morning, Norman. I do not have a hangover after St. Patty's Day, so I am fine and looking forward to a better week for the Toronto Maple Leafs because last week really was terrible for them.
Well, no doubt. Saturday was shit. The Leafs losing to the Senators in Ottawa. The 31st place team in the league. They lost to the Senators. But Sunday was good for you, Mike, because the one and only Sarah McLachlan was in my hometown, London, Ontario, Canada. Well, the city I live in right now, and she was looking good as always, performing well as always. And I know you DVR'd it or PVR'd it in Canada, so I'll let you experience it for yourself down the line. What kind of experience are we going to get as supporters and interested followers of the Maple Leafs this week?
Well, I mean, they start the week off with the back-to-back Nashville on Tuesday in Buffalo. I'll be at that game on Wednesday. And as you know, as we well know from doing various convos over the years, when they come to Buffalo, it's a trap because they usually can't win here. They've had a little more success in the Austin Matthews era, but it's always a tough game. And Nashville is one of the tougher teams in the Western Conference. So it's not going to be an easy couple games. But the Leafs really have to get their ship straightened because right now they're ready to run into the rocks. Defensively, they've been inept. The last 4 games, 23 goals against. Freddie Anderson pulled twice. They had to score 7 goals against Philadelphia to get a win. And then they basically do not show up in the second of back-to-back against the Senators. And after the game, it's Garrett Sparks, the backup goaltender, who is, trying to rally the troops and say we need to play with more emotion. Well, I think he needs to stop pucks. So wow. That's it doesn't have to come from the backup goaltender. He should, concentrate on his job. It has to come from the leadership of the team, from Austin Matthews, from John Tavares, from Mitch Marner, to sort of call everybody to account for the way that they've been playing, because the way that they're playing right now, they're a first-round elimination.
When I see demoralization, I wonder if that's because the kids, many of them mature, some of them still petulant, all of them still developing, have tuned out the head coach. And now I let me preface that and qualify that with these Maple Leafs have no pot to piss in. They have no pedigree. They have no right to do that. But when you see demoralization and you see these frowns, you see guys looking exasperated, you wonder, well, what the hell's going on here? You guys are in your early 20s. It's only game 70. You should be geeked up for what's to come in the potential Stanley Cup run. Why does everybody look like they just finished a half marathon and they want to puke?
Well, I mean, these are the dog days of the year after the deadline, before the playoffs. They know who they're going to play. They're locked into playing Boston. The only thing to really fight for is home ice advantage. And maybe that's not that big of a deal to them. I think it is a big deal in terms of beating Boston. But what I think here is that I don't care if these players have tuned out the coach. The coach knows how you have to play in the playoffs to win. And simply put, this team has not shown any compunction to play the way you have to in the playoffs to achieve victory. And if they go in against Boston and think they're going to win game 7-6, then by April 21st, they're going to be on the golf course at Glen Abbey. So they need to stop listening to their coach and playing a more attentive two-way game. Otherwise, they're not going to win.
Is there a way we could gin up a stat, a metric, some hockey analytics to back up an argument that we don't need a head coach in this game? The coaches are pointless. There's a sense that Mike Babcock is the problem here with this team. Mike Babcock is stubborn, and I'm not sure his ingenuity levels are where they need to be right now. It doesn't mean he can't change that. But to suggest that because Mike Babcock is behind the bench, this team is inhibited from being great, it's just, I mean, people who bring that up are shortchanging themselves and not necessarily thinking it through. This is a collective, and it doesn't matter if you have a veteran team or if you have a inexperienced team. You need a head coach, and I'm not sure why one of the most accomplished and tenured and respected head coaches in the game can't be the head coach in Toronto with this particular group. Mike. I'm at a loss for why people still keep pointing the finger at Mike Babcock for being the problem. It just doesn't make sense to me.
I actually think that that's starting to turn around, but not that they're gonna run the Leafs based on polls of fans, but TSN ran a poll, I think it was last week, that said that the coaching was at fault, and this week, after the way they've played and giving up 6 goals in 3 games and 5 in the other one and losing 3 of 4, they switched to like over 50% that the players were at fault. It's like, okay, the coach is telling you how to play. Now, the thing is, and I wrote about this yesterday, I think everybody, this is a multi-system failure. Everybody is responsible. The management, the coaching, the players. Mm-hmm. And we can go over the what we've talked about since the deadline about Dubas not adding a defenseman, about Babcock overusing players. But in the end, it's the players who have to produce, and that is the problem. They're not playing up to what the expectations are. Now, I think that they're flawed right now because of the injuries to Gardner and Dermott. There can't be any excuses. They have to step up. They're not stepping up right now, and they simply have to be able to achieve victory when it counts.
Let me remind a lot of Nylanderites and fans of the young generation of players that Mike Babcock is not your pariah. Mike Babcock is the guy who stood in front of the media in the final hours before the deadline of this impasse between the Leafs and Camp Nylander was going to combust. He stood there and talked about how the Leafs need Willie and they want Willie. So let's be honest. Like, the guy has his methods aren't archaic. His methods are the way they are, and they have proven to be successful with the right group of players. And I mean, the jury's still out whether this group and what the head coach is preaching are compatible. But Mike Babcock is a fan of guys like William Nylander and a lot of these young players. And he put his money where his mouth is. Let's see these guys put their play where they're getting their dollars and actually produce not only for themselves and the fan base, but for the damn head coach who's put his neck out on the line for these guys. This is the Leafs Convo podcast for Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough. VanguardNE.ca. We're so thankful to have them aboard as our title sponsor. My son and I, my son turns 7 tomorrow, Mike, my son Evan, a big fan of yours. You know that. My kids love you. We're just talking about old Maple Leafs because he has a whole bunch of cards, Leafs from the 40s and 50s on them. He asked me who my favorite old-time Leafs were, and I'm just like Dave Keon and Ron Ellis. And he comes back, he says, I want to be Sid Smith and Tim Hortons. And I say, Tim Hortons? Why do you want to be Tim Hortons? Because after the game, he gives all the players coffee. And I was thinking to myself, I'd love to see a Tim Horton kind of player on that Leafs blue line right now. Wouldn't you?
Well, I think the closest to Tim Horton in terms of the style of play right now is a guy like Shea Weber. Now, Horton wasn't as big, but, rough and tumble. I mean, he wasn't great offensively, but that, the Leafs need a Scott Stevens type of defenseman on the blue line. I don't know, and not to say somebody who takes out people's knees, but just somebody who instills a little bit of fear. But that may be part of the game of the past. But I'm encouraged. The thing is, I'm encouraged about the future with the Leafs in terms of their defense. Rasmus Sandin had 3 assists yesterday for the Marlies. I think he's going to be in the mix next season. I don't think they want to bring him up this year because he's 18. He's having a really good year. I don't think they want to mess with that. Timothy Liljegren's had an off and on season with injuries. Mm-hmm. He missed the World Junior because he missed a sizable chunk of time. But there's 2 guys right there. But again, when it comes to the defense, it's going to be addressed and has to be addressed outside of the organization because really they don't, Sandin may be a top 4 defenseman in a couple of years, but you can't expect a 19-year-old to play 20 plus minutes. They need to go out and get a top 4 defenseman. They've needed that for a while. They got Muzzin. Mm-hmm. That's not enough. They're going to lose Gardner. They need a top 4 defenseman. And if you have to give up William Nylander, and I'm not saying, give him up because he sucks. I'm saying give him up because he has value and because you could clear the salary and get a defenseman. That's what you have to do.
I give up with the William Nylander people, the Nylanderites. I love them to death. I love you. I know how much you love William Nylander. But there's no point qualifying how we feel about William Nylander's future with this team anymore. People think we hate his guts and he's to blame, that we blame him. We've never said that, ever. I don't know. We've done 300 podcasts. Go and listen to other podcasts. We've never said that. But he is an asset that can be turned around for something that the Leafs need more of. The Leafs have an abundance and a surplus of offensive talent, as we've seen with William Nylander. The guy can enter the offensive zone with the best of them. But if you looked at this team and said, who is a redundant quality, who is a redundant asset, and who can we use to turn around for something we need, you're not trading Marner. It's not Kadri. It's not Marlowe. And I know people want Connor Brown. Those guys just don't have the value. It is William Nylander. And
yeah, I mean, William Nylander or Andreas Janssen or Kasper Kapanen. Nobody wants to give them up. But the thing is that you have a stockpile of offensive wingers. You can afford to give up one because you have a guy in Jeremy Bracco who could be called up or brought up next year and be the guy. Be another winger on that group. So I think they have options. A lot of young
fans are fans of the Maple Leafs because of William Nylander. The flow, the skating style. I mean, the guy can flash and dash. This year hasn't been the best thing for him because of the nonsense to start the season. But people draw fandom the way they want to from different things, and I totally respect that. Where we are, Mike, I just want to see this team win a Stanley Cup. And the question is, I mean, how do you get all of your ducks in a row to put yourself in the best position to be able to do that? To wrap this podcast up, Mike, what can we could try to be positive about it, but if we were in Mike Babcock's ear or Kyle Dubas's ear, or if we're just trying to get people therapeutically to relax and calm down, how can we present the next 12 games of the regular season and whatever's to come in the playoffs as a real positive, a real opportunity beside the challenge, a real chance for this team to grow, take that next step?
Well, I mean, fundamentally, I think what needs to happen is that the leadership at the club, whether that be Tavares or Patrick Marleau, need to sort of get the troops in line. I mean, there's very little that you can do externally or, with the roster. I mean, I heard Darren Drager this morning suggest that, with Sparks and consistency, and I believe me, it's like I don't think he's an NHL goaltender that if you called up Michael Hutchinson and played him as a backup for a game or two instead of Sparks, you might get points out of them, where with Sparks you won't. But that ship has sailed. I mean, he's already played most of his allotment of games, and that's something that'll happen next year. But I don't think you're going to see. You'll see a Cali Rosen called up when he's healthy. They'll give him a look over the last 10 or some odd games. And, maybe they tinker around with some of the fourth liners, but really the die is cast. This is the team. The team that's there has to straighten out, or like I said, it'll be an early exit.
If the players have tuned out Mike Babcock, it's on them, and it's unprofessional. And I'm sure general managers, coaches, hockey people are going to look down on it. I mean, being a petulant brat might put you in good stead with fans who are of the same ilk. I mean, go on social media. But when you're actually in real time playing in a professional realm, making millions of dollars, being an adult, that doesn't look good for anybody. The body language has certainly given off some suggestions that there's something the matter. What Mike Babcock, I mean, does he just go back to the drawing board and think, all right, is there a new approach to dealing with these guys? Maybe just let them take a breather, let it be a free for all, or does he still keep clamping down, Mike?
I think he's going to stay with what he's been preaching. I think because he thinks that is the key to victory.
This might be an audition for spots going forward, Mike. I mean, if this thing goes splat, are they not going to reassess?
I think if they lose in the first round, if there's an early exit, if it's disappointing for this team, that Kyle Dubas is going to have to reevaluate what the construct of the roster is. That doesn't mean trading Mitch Marner or something like that, but they have a glut at forward. They need defensive help. They need a change. They need players that can play the way Babcock wants to play. And that'll be the key to victory. And if they don't do that, then maybe in a couple years, Babcock
Triple M, buddy. More minutes for Marincin. Just end this podcast. Talk to you later, bud.
Thanks, Norm.